Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really getting into the compelling history of Japan. It's this island nation. Seems like it was always being forged by the sword, shaped by war, but then transformed by peace. So our mission here is to kind of unpack how Japan navigated all that change, how it found its way back from the edge, really. Yeah, and we're drawing on some comprehensive sources that look at that whole journey from samurai to surrender, basically covering centuries of change, conflict, and resilience. It should be a fascinating conversation. Hopefully some surprising things in there for you. Okay, let's dive into Japan's incredible journey, right? So let's start way back, maybe the 12th century. Japan's in this period of intense civil war. And out of that chaos, you get the rise of the samurai, this warrior class that, well, it really defined Japanese culture for centuries, don't they? What was it about that time? How did they gain so much power? What were they really doing besides just, fighting?
That's a great starting point because our sources show, yeah, they were warriors, obviously, but so much more. Think elite bureaucrats, scholars, and crucially, enforcers of the strict code Bushido, the way of the warrior. It all sort of crystallizes with the Kamakura shogunate established 1192, and that kicks off almost 700 years of military rule by shoguns. It's about control, not just combat.
Right, 700 years, and not exactly quiet years. You had the Genpei War early on, but those Mongol invasions, 1274 and 1281, they seem huge. And then later, the Shinin War, which just dragged on forever, right? 1467 to 1477. How did those invasions specifically shape things? Not just militarily, but like the national psyche?
Well, the Mongol invasions are fascinating. Japan barely survived them twice. It really felt like a miracle at the time. And this is where that idea of the divine wines, a kamikaze, gets locked in. This belief that Japan was somehow protected. It wasn't just a temporary thing. It deeply shaped a national belief system, this sense of, I suppose, unique destiny, fostering a kind of resilience that, echoes for centuries.
So it's not just about the samurai ruling. It's about a core belief forming. A kind of national myth, almost, that instills this resilience and identity. That's really key. Okay, so the samurai established this powerful foundation, but then, ironically, there are power fragments, right? And Japan plunges into this incredibly chaotic period, the Sengoku Jidai, the warring states, mid-15th to late 16th century.
Right.
What did that actually look like, this landscape of rival warlords, the daimyo? Must have been brutal.
Oh, absolutely brutal. Constant conflict, castles going up, alliances falling apart almost overnight. It was extremely fragmented. But interestingly, it's out of that very chaos that you get the figures who finally pull Japan back together. You have Oda Nobunaga, who starts the whole unification process. Then Toyotomi Hideyoshi, he really expands on it. But it's Tokugawa Ieyasu who finishes the job decisively at the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600.
Sekigahara, right. And the impact of that unification, I mean, going from constant war to long-term peace, what did that really mean for Japan's path forward?
It meant everything. Ieyasu's victory ushers in the Tokugawa shogunate, and they rule a unified and actually remarkably peaceful Japan for over 250 years. It's a fundamental shift. The whole nation's energy turns inward development, culture, economy, instead of constant fighting. It shapes everything for centuries.
That's just astounding, that kind of shift. From utter chaos to such prolonged stability, all under a military government, shows the power of that unification, which then brings us to another huge turning point, 1853. Commodore Perry. The black ships arrive. And just like that, Japan's long isolation is over. What did that sudden confrontation with the West trigger?
It was a massive shock. Perry's arrival basically forced Japan to see just how far behind it was, technologically speaking, compared to the West. And that directly leads to the Meiji Restoration in 1868. The emperor is sort of restored to symbolic power, but the really incredible part, looking back, is the speed of modernization. Japan just pivots. They look west, they study, they adopt everything, military tech, tactics, industry, government structures that shows this amazing capacity for rapid strategic transformation. They basically remake themselves into a modern power in just a few decades.
And they didn't waste any time flexing that new muscle, did they? We see the first Sino-Japanese War, 1894-95, then the Russo-Japanese War, 1904-05.
Right.
How did the world react, especially to Japan beating Russia, a major European power?
That victory over Russia sent shockwaves, truly. First time an Asian nation decisively beats a European empire in the modern era, it completely shifted perceptions of global power. And Japan continued to expand its influence. Annexing Korea in 1910 is a key example from that period.
So that rapid adaptation, that Meiji-era strength, it really sets the stage for Japan's, let's say, complex and often aggressive role in the 20th century, which leads us, unfortunately, into World War II. And the sources are pretty clear. Japan wasn't just drawn in, it was an aggressor. driven by resource needs, imperial ideology.
Exactly. The expansionist drive was already there. It starts really heating up with the invasion of Manchuria back in 1931. Then the full-scale Second Sino-Japanese War breaks out in 1937. But the event that pulls the West in, undeniably, is Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. That ignites the Pacific War.
And Japan, it seems, thought they could land a knockout blow, force a quick negotiation.
That appears to be the thinking, yes.
But they just fundamentally miscalculated the U.S. response, didn't they?
Yeah.
Underestimated the industrial power, the resolve.
A massive miscalculation, and it led to this absolutely brutal slog across the Pacific. Yeah. Key battles like Midway and 42, a major turning point. Then the Guadalcanal campaign, long and savage. And those island-hopping campaigns later on, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and 45, just ferocious fighting. As defeat started looking more and more likely, Japan got desperate. You see the kamikaze attacks, total mobilization of the home front, trying anything.
And then the war ends in this absolutely devastating way. The atomic bombs. Hiroshima, August 6th, 1945. Nagasaki, August 9th. Just days later, Emperor Hirohito announces the surrender, August 15th. The end of the war. The scale of that ending. The destruction. It had to force a complete reevaluation for Japan, didn't it? Okay, so from that utter devastation, how does Japan even begin to rebuild? Let's talk about the post-war period, the American occupation. What was the plan there?
It was a huge undertaking, guided largely by the Americans. Japan was completely disarmed, first off. Then the focus shifted to democratization, rebuilding the economy, basically restructuring society. A really key part of this was the new constitution, and specifically Article 9.
Article 9, right? The peace clause.
Exactly. It states that the Japanese people forever renounce war as a sovereign right of the nation. It's this profound commitment to pacifism baked right into their foundational law, a total shift.
And somehow, from those ashes, Japan transforms itself again, this time into an economic giant. How did that happen so quickly? It's remarkable.
The economic recovery is legendary, the Japanese economic miracle. A combination of factors, really U.S. aid initially, government policy, a focus on technology and exports, a strong work ethic. But it's also true, and important to note, that the legacy of the war itself, especially Japan's actions in Asia, that remains a really complex and sometimes contentious topic today. Lots of debate still.
Yeah, you can see that. Still, the resilience is undeniable. To go through such complete destruction and reinvention, it's quite something. And that brings us neatly to the present day, really. These ongoing complexities around the war legacy. You see debates within Japan, right? Apologies versus downplaying or denying past actions. How does a nation navigate that? Such different views of its own history.
Well, that's the core issue, isn't it? And it's not unique to Japan. Many nations wrestle with difficult pasts. What our sources suggest, though, is that despite these internal debates, and they are real debates, the overwhelming sentiment among Japanese people today aligns with that spirit of Article 9, a deep commitment to peace. But it does raise that fundamental question. How do you reconcile these conflicting narratives? How does a nation make sense of a past that includes both, fierce militarism and profound pacifism?
It really forces you to think about historical memory, national identity. It's never just one simple story, is it? Well, what an incredible sweep of history we've covered. From the Samurai Code to the chaos of warring states, the dizzying speed of modernization, imperial ambition, the devastation of World War II, and finally, this post-war identity built on peace. It really is a story of constant, almost radical reinvention.
It truly is. And maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to mull over. Japan's past is so deeply defined by war and power, yet its present is constitutionally bound to peace. How does a nation's identity evolve with such seemingly contradictory foundational stories? How does it navigate the tension that duality creates day to day on the world stage? Something to think about.
Definitely something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Japan's fascinating and layered history. We hope you'll continue exploring its rich past and complex present.